Every single time you send a text or stream a movie, you're basically speaking a language that was invented way, way before the first computer was even a glimmer in someone's eye. So today, let's pull back the curtain and meet the forgotten architects who literally wrote the rules for our digital world. Yeah, we live in this amazing world of just instant everything. But think about it for a second. This whole system of sending and receiving information, it didn't just happen. It's not magic. It was built piece by piece on ideas from almost 100 years ago. So who were these people? Who laid those very first bricks?
All right, let's dive in. It's time to meet these unsung pioneers.
Okay, so let's put some names to these pioneers. We're talking about H. Nyquist and R.V.L. Hartley. Now, back in the early 20th century, these guys were fixated on what seems like a simple problem today. How in the world do you cram more information and get it there reliably through a plain old telegraph wire?
And you've got to appreciate the time frame here. We're talking about the 1920s. The roaring 20s. Jazz, flappers, all that stuff. This is decades before anyone was even thinking about a digital computer. And yet, the concepts they were figuring out, they became the absolute bedrock for everything. Radio, TV, and yep, the internet you're on right this second.
So how did they do it? I mean, they didn't have silicon chips or programming languages. Nope. They did it with pure brain power, some serious math, and a few key academic papers that honestly would go on to change the world. Okay, check out this timeline. The story really kicks off in 1924 with Nyquist. Then, boom, 1928 hits. That was a huge year. Both Nyquist and Hartley dropped major papers. It was like this explosion of new ideas. But then, look at that gap. Things go kind of quiet for 20 years. That's how long these revolutionary ideas just sat there, simmering, before a guy named Claude Shannon came along in '48 to blow the whole thing wide open.
And even the titles of their papers tell you so much. Certain factors affecting telegraph speed, transmission of information. It's all about the telegraph. These guys weren't sci-fi authors dreaming about the internet. They were practical engineers trying to solve the very real, very tangible problems of their day. But here's the beautiful part. In solving those immediate problems, they accidentally uncovered these profound universal truths about what information is.
So for 2 decades, these concepts were bubbling under the surface, mostly in engineering circles. And then along comes the person who's going to take that solid foundation and build an absolute skyscraper on top of it. And that person is Claude Shannon. Now, if you've heard of anyone in information theory, it's probably this guy. He's called the father of information theory for a reason. Total genius. He's the one who gave us the concept of the bit, the fundamental unit of all digital information. But, and this is the key point, he didn't just pull these ideas out of thin air. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Shannon himself, in his legendary 1948 paper, gives a direct shout out. He says their work contained a basis for such a theory. That's it, right there. It's Shannon tipping his hat to the giants whose shoulders he was standing on. A really powerful acknowledgement. So that begs the question, right? If Nyquist and Hartley laid the foundation, what exactly was that foundation? And what new brilliant stuff did Shannon add on top?
Okay, let's break this down. Think of it like this. Nyquist and Hartley, they were figuring out the size of the pipe. They answered questions like, how fast can we possibly push symbols down this telegraph wire? And how do we even measure the amount of stuff we're sending? In fact, it was Hartley who first had the brilliant idea to measure information logarithmically, so they defined the potential. Shannon comes along and builds the whole plumbing system. His 2 huge additions were, first, dealing with noise, all the static and interference that messes up a signal, and second, and this is mind-blowing, he realized that language has patterns. For example, in English, the letter Q is almost always followed by a U. By understanding those statistics, you can compress the message and send it way more efficiently. It was a total game changer.
All right, so let's zoom out. What's the bottom line here? What is their enduring legacy in the world we all live in today? Well, it's pretty simple. Their ideas were the launchpad, the absolute launchpad for the entire field of information theory. Without their hard work figuring out the basics of sending a signal, Shannon's grand theory, and the entire digital universe that came from it, well, it might never have gotten off the ground. So that's the whole journey right there, from telegraph to terabytes. It all started with Nyquist and Hartley, who laid down the fundamental principles. Then Shannon came along and built this beautiful, comprehensive mathematical framework on top of their work.
And that framework, that's what underpins all modern communication. Every single time you send an email, stream a show, or do a search, you're using the playbook that these guys wrote. The line from their work to your screen is totally direct.
And that leaves us with one last kind of mind-bending thought, doesn't it? Just like Nyquist and Hartley were solving what they thought were just telegraph problems, what are people working on right now? In some lab or university, working on something that seems totally obscure to us today, but is actually laying the foundation for a future we can't even begin to imagine. Who are the next unsung architects, and what are they building for us right now?